Good day, everyone. I'm David, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is DEI at the hospital, addressing bias in medical staff, credentialing, and peer review. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, Elizabeth Nelson. Elizabeth Nelson helps medical staff across the country with medical staff bylaws and works for medical societies on medical staff issues. She is a frequent speaker on medical staff legal issues. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, David, and thank you all for tuning into this webinar. The term DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, has been used in the last several years, politicized highly, and people have different opinions about its appropriateness and utility. The need for equity in approaching patient care, in order to improve patient care, it's important that the scientists and clinicians look at all kinds of patients, all patients, in order to make sure that there's access to care, that diseases are being treated appropriately. Access should not be an issue of woke versus not woke. Who can become a provider? Who can practice medicine? Who can practice clinical professions? And an important part of solving that question of who can practice comes down to peer review, is to look at the issues of equity, diversity, inclusion at the hospital, where we have systems of determining who gets to practice, who gets to do what to patients. That is in law, in accreditation standards, and in professionalism standards set by the professions themselves. And if bias is involved in those systems, that affects access to care, which is a basic concern no matter where you are in the country, no matter what your political beliefs are. It's important to know that how hospitals determine who gets to practice is set by the hospital medical staff, the clinicians that practice at that hospital. And while you might be coming at this webinar from a situation where you've been practicing medical staff law like I have for decades, or you've been very involved on the clinical side as a member of the medical staff on various committees like the Credentialing Committee, or you're on the administration side of healthcare, doing the important work in the medical staff office, processing those applications, and making sure that accreditation standards are met. Or you're in the side of running the hospital, or you're counsel to those folks who run the hospital. What I'm going to do at the outset is do a quick overview of peer review and how it works and how it's supposed to work, and then drill down into issues that come up if peer review is done wrong or done for the wrong reasons, and then conclude with some discussion of best practices to alleviate some of those circumstances and to achieve compliance and fairness. So let's get going. This is physician peer review. It's from the American Medical Association. Peer review is ubiquitous. It's mandatory in hospitals in the United States under law. Peer review is mandatory in hospitals under accreditation standards. And it's mandatory under medical staff bylaws. And peer review is a good thing. Again, the whole point of peer review is to improve the quality of patient care. Physicians reviewing physicians is the whole point of peer review. For physicians to establish the standards and to physicians to conduct the review is absolutely key to peer review. And maybe the most important point is that last one, so that accountants and attorneys like me are not deciding what is and what is not good medicine. Peer review is protected by law because it's a public good. It's good public policy for physicians to review other physicians and find out when there's good care, when there's bad care. States have peer review protections in statute. We have a federal statute that extends a protection to peer review. The challenge of hospital peer review is that it really gets piggybacked. Hospital peer review actions don't stay in the hospital. They have a wide effect. The interest, the patient care quality is a huge interest, but also we've got potential liability for hospitals and for medical staff leadership if they do it wrong. And those interests conflict or can conflict, and that all too can come together in a peer review procedure. I'm going to drill down more specifically to how peer review shows up. What am I talking about when I'm talking about peer review? Well, in a hospital medical staff process, and that's what I'm focusing on is hospital medical staff peer review, all these things are peer review. Are all those components equal? It depends on state law. I want to draw your attention finally to the problems of peer review. So targeting a professional, picking out a doctor, a member of the medical staff for the wrong reasons blows up all the good protections that are available under state law and federal law. It has to be so carefully constructed to make sure that it doesn't. If it's done for the wrong reasons, it damages professionals, obviously jeopardizes patient care, and it creates liability. That the immunities, generally speaking, that are available for peer review are conditioned. You got to meet the conditions. Here's the ones for the federal immunity. It's a good immunity, but it only applies if you meet these four things. And an important issue if you're in the situation where peer review is being used for the wrong reasons, any discriminatory reason, what the Healthcare Quality Improvement Act requires is that it has to be based on fairness. Fairness means the medical staff process has to be fair, and that it's a balance of the medical staff process and the members' rights. Remember that the federal law is not required. It offers an immunity. If you meet the conditions, you get the immunity. If you don't want to, you don't think you need the immunity, don't meet the conditions. Doesn't mean that the hospital is going to be shut down. So under the Federal Healthcare Quality Improvement Act, you've got to make sure in your process that, and it says physician, that I'm quoting from the statute in these slides, if a physician requests a hearing, the notice has got to comply with these requirements. In the hearing, the physician has these rights. So I'd say at least do a quick check on your medical staff bylaws. There's more to look at though. Compliance with state law, the technical lists in the federal and state law of this needs to be in the bylaws and this needs to be in the hearing. All those things are important. Thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That does conclude the session for today. Thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now and have a great day ahead.